This is FilmBookCast.
FilmBookCast.
FilmBookCast, the official podcast of FilmBook. Get ready for the latest in film news, TV show news, and theatrical reviews. FilmBook's podcast starts now.
Hello, and welcome to FilmBookCast, the official podcast of FilmBook. I'm Kevin Allen. If you're tuning into the FilmBookCast for the first time, welcome, and thank you. If you've listened before, welcome back and thank you. I'll be talking about film and TV news, including the Oscars and SAG Awards continue to rethink their eligibility requirements as the coronavirus pandemic continues. The producers of a new Russell Crowe thriller are betting movie lovers will be ready to hit the theaters by July, and Star Trek takes characters from its past and turns them into the future of its growing TV presence. I'll also have a review of the movie Capone, after Tom Hardy goes all in with some big character choices in his portrayal of the notorious gangster Al Capone during the final year of Capone's life. But unfortunately for Hardy and for writer-director-editor Josh Trank, this film is a pretty big mess. Although I suspect it will spawn a few good memes. You can find more FilmBookCast podcasts on film-book.com by using the search term FilmBookCast. You can also email us at podcast@film-book.com with FilmBookCast in the subject line. Let's get to movie news. The Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences is helping out documentaries that had their Oscar eligibility impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the Academy has changed eligibility rules so documentaries can qualify even if they did not have a 7-day theatrical release in Los Angeles County and a 7-day theatrical release in New York City. Both a New York run and an LA run were required for the 2020 Oscars. Documentaries released through streaming or video-on-demand services without a festival showing or theatrical run can still be eligible if the film had a previously planned theatrical release and if the documentary is made available on the Academy's streaming service within 60 days of its streaming or broadcast. At the moment, the 93rd Oscars are scheduled for February 28, 2021. The COVID-19 crisis has also caused the SAG Awards to change its eligibility rules. It's not clear yet what the changes will be. However, earlier this week, SAG Award organizers sent a letter to film studios to let them know that new guidelines will be coming. According to Deadline.com, titles with a planned theatrical release will be eligible if they're streamed or released on video on demand first. Deadline reports that the SAG Award rules will be finalized next month. Right now, the SAG Awards are tentatively scheduled for January 24th, 2021. SAG-AFTRA wants its members to get the union's okay before accepting new work during the pandemic. On Thursday, the union posted a notice on its website outlining how members must get in touch with SAG-AFTRA so that the union can determine if the job has taken appropriate health and safety precautions. According to The Hollywood Reporter, that notice was posted a day after SAG-AFTRA met with Los Angeles County's public health director to seek guidance on safety standards and protocols for preventing the spread of COVID-19 when productions start up again. Say hello to the director of the Scarface reboot. Luke Guadagnino, who directed Call Me By Your Name, has been tapped to direct Universal Pictures' new take on the film. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Joel and Ethan Coen, who've written more big movies than I'll pause to name here, are writing the newest Scarface. The original 1932 movie was set in Chicago and directed by Howard Hawks. But if you're like me, when you hear Scarface, you think of Brian De Palma's 1983 story that's set in Miami, with Al Pacino starring as Tony Montana. The newest version will be set in Los Angeles. Disney's not throwing away its shot with Hamilton. Sorry, that lead is too obvious and will not be accepted. Okay, you're right, that was lazy. How about Hamilton fans who are young, scrappy, and hungry for the beloved musical will soon be able to see it on Disney+. Proceed. Thank you. Anyway, The House of Mouse will release its filmed version of the original Broadway production on July 3rd. This is the version that Disney was originally going to release in theaters in October of 2021. There's no official statement that the premiere was fast-tracked because of the coronavirus lockdown, but creator and star Lin-Manuel Miranda released a statement saying in part, quote, "I'm so grateful to Disney and Disney Plus for reimagining and moving up our release to July 4th weekend of this year in light of the world turning upside down. I'm so grateful to all the fans who asked for this, and I'm so glad we're able to make it happen." If you somehow have access to podcasts but have never heard of Hamilton, the show blends rap, hip-hop, R&B, and classic Broadway to tell the story of Alexander Hamilton, one of America's founding fathers. Hamilton won 11 Tony Awards, a Grammy, an Olivier Award, and a Pulitzer Prize. This is technically the movie news section, but I felt I would be remiss if I did not mention a couple Broadway stories here, so here they are. Broadway will stay dark at least through Labor Day. On Tuesday, the Broadway League confirmed it was extending its show blackout until at least September 6th. That's 3 full months beyond the last extension, which bumped back the original April 12th reopening to June 7th. The lights went out on Broadway back on March 12th as the coronavirus pandemic continued to spread across the United States. According to The Hollywood Reporter, some fear even early September may be too soon to reopen, since many Broadway shows cost a ton of money to run. Starting up with social distancing rules in theaters might not allow enough ticket sales for the shows to make money. Disney's Frozen has become Broadway's first big-name casualty of the COVID-19 crisis. This week, the production announced it will not return when Broadway reopens, whenever that may be. Frozen, which is based on the 2013 blockbuster film of the same name, opened at the St. James Theater on March 22, 2018. Anyone who bought tickets to Frozen through Ticketmaster will automatically get a refund within 30 days. If you bought a ticket elsewhere, you'll have to contact the seller for more information on getting a refund. Okay, let's close out this news block with one more bit of movie news. Amazon is reportedly looking into buying AMC theaters. Neither side has commented on word of an Amazon takeover, but owning theaters would give Amazon a showcase for its major releases. Last year, the delivery and tech giant moved away from having new movies run in theaters for 90 days before releasing them on its streaming service. However, that move made theater chains less willing to show Amazon's films. A buyout could be beneficial to AMC as well, which was hit hard by the COVID-19 lockdown. The crisis forced theaters to close back in March, and that led to the laying off of more than 600 employees, a downgraded credit rating, and speculation of permanent closure. That's all for this week's movie news. Now let's take a look at some movie trailers. While many theatrical premiere dates are being pushed back because of COVID-19, at least one movie has moved its premiere up. Unhinged, starring Russell Crowe, is scheduled to be released on July 1st. Deadline.com reports the original release date was September 4th. The CEO of Solstice Studios, the company that produced Unhinged, said the rest of the 2020 and 2021 calendar became too crowded after most films were pushed back, so Solstice decided to roll out Unhinged a little bit sooner. The movie is a psychological thriller where Crowe's character takes road rage to a whole new level.
What do you want?
I need you to learn what a bad day really is. I need you to learn how to say you're sorry.
Even with the July 1st release date set, Solstice Studios says it won't do anything that isn't safe or isn't in line with the recommendation of health experts. Can a switchboard operator and a radio DJ discover the truth behind a series of strange reports, radio signals, and phone calls in 1950s New Mexico?
Number, please.
Hello? Is this Lee? Large object holding over my land like a tornado.
That's the question in the trailer for The Vast of Night. Jake Horowitz and Sierra McCormick star as a pair drawn into a scavenger hunt towards the unknown. The Vast of Night is the feature film directorial debut of Andrew Patterson. It's out now if you can find a drive-in theater that's playing it. Otherwise, the movie will be available through Amazon Prime Video on May 29th. A short film released back in 2017 is now getting the feature film treatment. Yes, God, Yes is a coming-of-age film written and directed by Karen Maine and starring Natalia Dyer as Alice. Alice is a 16-year-old who always pictured herself as a good Catholic girl. But when an online chat turns racy, Alice discovers masturbation and then becomes racked with guilt.
So, Alice, how would you describe your relationship with Jesus?
Yes, God, Yes will be released through Vertical Entertainment in July. More than 50 years after solving their first case, Scooby-Doo and friends are ready for a big screen reboot.
Discover the epic origin story of the greatest team of heroes in the history of mystery.
Scoob from Warner Brothers Studios retools the team's roots and gives the characters a slick computer animation makeover. The film also expands the long-running Scooby-Doo universe by bringing in characters from the Hanna-Barbera library, which is now owned by Warner Brothers. The movie features the voices of Will Forte, Gina Rodriguez, Zac Efron, and Mark Wahlberg, among others. Scoob was originally slated for a theatrical release on May 15th, but that was scrapped by the coronavirus crisis. It's available now through various on-demand services. That's it for movie trailers. Let's turn to television news. Some familiar Star Trek characters will once again boldly go where no one has gone before. CBS All Access has ordered a new series called Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. According to Variety, the show will star Anson Mount as Captain Christopher Pike, Rebecca Romaine as Number One, and Ethan Peck as Science Officer Spock. The series will follow the adventures of the USS Enterprise in the decade before Captain Kirk took command of the Federation's flagship. Characters Spock, Pike, and Number One all appeared in Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, which is also on CBS All Access. Their performance quickly had Trek fans calling for a spin-off. Apparently, the powers that be have heard those cries and have made it so. A premiere date for Star Trek Strange New Worlds has not yet been set. Long-running ABC thriller How to Get Away with Murder has ended with all the twists, turns, and murder fans have come to expect. The Shonda Rhimes-created murder mystery show starring Viola Davis aired its series finale on Friday. As usual, I will not go into spoilers. But more people die, and as the title has always suggested, some do end up getting away with murder. Initial reaction to the finale on social media was positive. As any TV fan will tell you, it's not easy for long-running shows to stick the landing, so congrats to the cast and crew of How to Get Away with Murder. The unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt has broken out of sitcom retirement for a new Choose Your Own Adventure special. This week, Netflix released Kimmy Schmidt vs. the Reverend, where viewers get to choose what Kimmy and her friends do next. It's similar to the mechanics of Black Mirror Bandersnatch, which was also on Netflix, but more silly and fun, which is true to the Kimmy Schmidt universe. The premise is, as Kimmy prepares to marry an English prince who's 12th in line to the throne, she discovers an old Choose Your Own Adventure book that Kimmy believes belonged to her during the years she was held captive in an underground bunker. But the book actually belongs to another person who's still trapped in an undiscovered bunker, so Kimmy and friends set out on a rescue mission. Kimmy Schmidt vs. the Reverend is available now. Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj returns this weekend. The Netflix talk show was originally supposed to return with new episodes on March 29th, but then the COVID-19 crisis broke out. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the first new episode will be called What Happens If You Can't Pay Your Rent? Minhaj will film the episode, along with 6 others, from his home in front of a green screen. The show's signature graphics will be produced remotely. Ridley Scott will now be producing content for Apple TV. Scott, who's behind movies like Top Gun, Gladiator, and Thelma and Louise, as well as TV shows like The Man in the High Castle and The Good Wife, is reportedly getting 7 figures from his new deal with Apple. Actress Katie Sackhoff is joining the cast of The Mandalorian for Season 2. Sackhoff will play Bo-Katan Kryze, a Mandalorian warrior who first appeared in the animated series Star Wars Rebels. It's the first time Kryze has appeared in a live-action Star Wars project. The announcement comes a little less than 2 months after it was announced that Rosario Dawson would appear in the second season of The Mandalorian as Jedi Ahsoka Tano. This will also be Tano's first appearance in the live-action Star Wars universe after appearing in 2 different cartoons. The second season of The Mandalorian is expected to land on Disney Plus in October. ESPN's Last Dance docuseries on Michael Jordan will be heading into overtime. The 10-part series about Jordan's last year with the Chicago Bulls airs its final episode this weekend, but then on Tuesday, ABC will air an hour-long special called After the Dance with Stephen A. Smith, a SportsCenter special. The show will feature Smith and basketball legend Magic Johnson discussing their biggest takeaways from The Last Dance and will be joined by other NBA greats. Speaking of greats, Hollywood has lost one of its funniest. Jerry Stiller passed away earlier this week. Stiller first rose to fame in the 1960s as one half of a comedy duo with his wife Ann. More recently, he was well known as Frank Costanza on Seinfeld and Arthur Spooner on The King of Queens. He's survived by his daughter Amy and his son Ben, who's also a famous actor and comedian. Jerry and Ben Stiller have even appeared in some movies together, including The Heartbreak Kid and Zoolander. Jerry Stiller was 92. Alright, let's move on to some TV trailers. Hannah Gadsby is back with a new Netflix special. It's called Douglas, and in the trailer, Gadsby opens by asking her audience a very reasonable question.
If you're here because of Nanette, why?
If you recall, Gadsby's shot to international superstardom in 2018 with Nanette, an emotional roller coaster ride that was part comedy but also a biographical tale of trauma. Nanette went on to win an Emmy Award in 2019. In her follow-up, Gadsby half jokes that she may have used up all her best material in her last special. As someone who saw the show live last year when she was touring in preparation for the Netflix taping, I can say Gadsby still has plenty of good stuff left. Viewers should appreciate that this is a completely different animal than Nanette because it would have to be. Hannah Gadsby, Douglas, premieres on Netflix on May 26th. Submitting for your approval, a trailer for Season 2 of The Twilight Zone. A synopsis for Season 2 says executive producer Jordan Peele and Simon Kinberg will be using introspection and exploration of the self to usher viewers into a familiar dimension. Lots of stars are slated to appear this season, including Kylie Bunbury, Topher Grace, Thomas Lennon, Tawny Newsome, and Paul F. Tompkins. The Twilight Zone Season 2 will air on CBS All Access beginning June 25th. In the new Showtime series The Good Lord Bird, Ethan Hawke stars as a man on a mission from God, but definitely not in the way the Blues Brothers meant it.
My name is Captain John Brown! And I am here in the name of the great King of Kings!
Hawk stars as abolitionist John Brown in the late 1850s in Kansas. Back then, the territory was a battleground between pro- and anti-slavery forces. Brown would eventually fight in a raid on the U.S. Armory at Harper's Ferry in what's now West Virginia. The battle was one of the events that sparked the American Civil War. The Good Lord Bird premieres on Showtime on August 9th. The CW's ever-expanding DC universe is making room for another superheroine. Stargirl premieres on Tuesday, May 19th, and a new trailer out this week offers a new take on the comic book's justice and injustice societies.
10 years ago, Starman and the JSA died saving the world. The Flash, Dr. Fate, they couldn't defeat the Injustice Society.
Stargirl centers around Courtney Whitmore, a high school senior who's called into superhero action when she discovers her stepfather's secret past with the Justice Society. That's all for this week's TV trailers. Next up is the Movie Review Spotlight. This week, the spotlight is on Capone, starring Tom Hardy. It's written, directed, and edited by Josh Trank. Now, Capone is not your father's mobster movie, or your mother's, or I would hazard to guess any of your relatives, neighbors, or casual acquaintances. Instead of focusing on Capone in his heyday as a mobster in Prohibition-era Chicago, this film centers on the last year of Capone's life, after he's been released from prison on tax evasion charges and is living in an opulent Florida mansion. It's certainly an interesting premise for a movie, but much like Capone's estate, which is surrounded by swampland, the rest of the film is not on solid ground and ultimately sinks under the weight of a messy script and a wildly over-the-top performance by Hardy, who plays a middle-aged, syphilitic, mentally and physically deteriorating Al Capone. I want to stop here and say that nobody sets out to make a bad movie, and when something that you work on really hard is not well received, it can feel devastating. I don't think there was a lack of trying from anyone involved in this film. In fact, Josh Trank, who I said wrote, directed, and edited this movie, may have tried to do too much. By that I mean I think there's a good movie in Capone somewhere, and I'd be curious to see the version where Trank hands off 2 of his jobs to other people. But I digress. Hardy, in lots of makeup and some prosthetics, scowls, scoffs, shambles, and stumbles his way through the film. As the movie progresses, Capone, who's only ever called Fonzie or Fonzo, starts to hallucinate about moments from his past. The first time Capone hallucinates, it's a very jarring transition, which I don't mind as an artistic choice. I think that can work as the film tries to show Capone's descent into madness. However, as the visions get more and more bizarre, each shift between the real world and the hallucinatory one continues to feel at best herky-jerky and at worst abrupt. Viewers follow along as Capone revisits the lives he destroyed and sees the trail of blood and violence that defined his legacy. Those scenes are juxtaposed with the present-day Capone, who is losing his mind and control of his bowels. His admirers and yes-men are gone, his money is gone, his family's faith in him is gone. There's good moments from a very capable surrounding cast. Matt Dillon plays Capone's former right-hand man. Kyle MacLachlan, as Capone's doctor, delivers some lines that are reminiscent of MacLachlan's days on Twin Peaks. Even Linda Cardellini does well as Capone's put-upon wife May. But none of them are really on screen enough to balance out or elevate Hardy's performance. They don't get to do much more than react to Hardy's muttering and sputtering. When Hardy does speak, his Capone voice is just weird. It sounds like Hardy's trying to do a gravelly version of Mr. Magoo if Magoo had a Brooklyn accent and didn't try to enunciate anything. Capone spends a big chunk of the movie trying to remember where he put $10 million he hid during his glory days. But much like Geraldo Rivera's opening of Capone's vault at the Lexington Hotel in 1986, there's nothing there for viewers or for Capone himself. In the end, Capone is little more than a fever dream that lets Tom Hardy chew as much scenery as he wants. I'd say this movie is a hard pass. Watch for Capone to do well at the Razzies. And if you see any memes on the internet featuring a middle-aged man wearing a diaper and a bathrobe while holding a machine gun, you have this movie to thank. Thank you for listening to this episode of FilmBookCast. You can find more of my work on film-book.com. Just search for Kevin Allen or FilmBookCast. You can also find me on Twitter at KAllenNYC. If you listen to this podcast on iTunes or another podcast service, please rate and review this episode. If you're listening to this podcast on our YouTube channel, FilmBook Podcast, please like our video, subscribe to our channel, and leave us a comment in the comment section. It helps other people discover our podcast. Please also consider becoming one of our patrons on Patreon at patreon.com/filmbook. Your support helps us create more engaging content. You'll find our Patreon link below in the description. If you want to tweet about this podcast, use the hashtag FilmBookCast. Tune in next week for a new episode of FilmBookCast. Thanks for listening. I'm Kevin Allen. And remember, you're the star of your own movie. don't be afraid to shine.